And he sent it back to the director of my institute, Horace Babcock, with the obvious implication: you've got to do something about this staff member of yours who's doing these very bad things. And so Horace called me down in the office one day after this, and I walked in his office, into the director's office, and I saw this paper lying in front of him with Chandrasekhar's scroll across it. And Horace looked at me and said, "Well," he said, "this is just too much, and you're going to have to start looking for another job." And so all I could say to him was, "Well, if you send me that in writing, please send me in writing." And I was waiting in great trepidation for weeks and months to get something in writing, and I finally never did, so I realized that he decided to give me another chance, so to speak. So that was fairly early in the game, and then some years went by, and there was the competition for time, particularly on the 200-inch telescope, was getting more and more heated, and people were saying, "Well, we can't continue to give time to this obviously incorrect and embarrassing research that ARP does." So finally they sent a letter to me from the allocation committee, including a number of the younger members of my institute, saying that unless I changed my line of research, that they would have to take away my telescope time. At that point, I considered the situation very carefully, and I figured that the evidence, although a lot more evidence could be gathered and has since been gathered since then, the important thing was not the evidence, because if it was true, it would come out someday. The important thing was the principle of scientific investigation, whether scientists could follow new lines of investigation and follow up on evidence which apparently contradicted the current theorems and the current paradigms. And I also felt that regardless of what happened to me personally, that this was the important issue, and that I had no choice but to resign on the point of this issue, so that if it developed, which I thought it would, that my line of investigation was correct, that people then in the future would say, "Okay, this was the wrong thing to do, and in the future we're going to have to see that this kind of thing doesn't happen again."
The observers come in now with the belief that we live in a Big Bang universe, and therefore all of their ways of understanding things are tailored to that. And they don't come in with the possibility that our alternative, or any other for that matter, is right, and really do it in an open-minded way. And of course what goes along with that is that observers who would like to test this way find it very hard to get observing time and so on. I mean, this relates to the whole issue of whether the complete lack of balance in the way the observational programs and the funding are conducted. There's no question about that. I don't think that anybody would argue about it.
I've always said that the cause of the troubles is the American graduate school. You get one person who then lectures to his students in graduate class, and because you have a system, you see, when we had graduated first degree, we were independent. We could thumb our noses at the professor, and in fact the best way to get ahead was to do something that the older people didn't agree with. To be right, that was the way to do it. And but in the graduate school, you all have to learn what you're taught, what the professors are teaching you, and then those people go out and get jobs, and they have another graduate, their own graduate school, and it just tier after tier. You get a few places like Caltech or like Harvard, and they set the fashion for every place.
I think there's a problem with graduate education. I think graduate education is not teaching students to think, to be independent researchers. I think it's teaching them to be part of a scientific society. And too much, especially students that are at the so-called elite institutions, I think they're taught too much the paradigm of their advisor.
All of us, whether or not we served in uniform, are veterans of a war in which freedom and free government are at stake. Such fullness of knowledge is the direct function of education. Most of us work hard to provide our homes with every possible comfort for our children. We safeguard their health. We strive to set before them good examples of moral living, of manners and deportment. Possibly, we even pamper them. Yet complacently, even carelessly, we commit our children to schools of which we know but little. We cannot meet the complexities of modern life with outmoded school systems. We must keep our educational standards abreast of the swift-moving times in which we live if we hope to preserve our national heritage and our American way of life, the American way.
When I was director of the National Observatory 20 years ago, there was a very well-known astronomer now. In fact, she's just won the Cosmology Prize. That's Vera Rubin. She was carrying out a program at Kitt Peak at the National Observatory of observing faint spiral galaxies with a view to looking to their redshift distribution, or their velocity distribution. And this was a program that everybody thought was a good program. And so she'd been given observing time, and at the end of about a year, she had completed about a third of her program. And so she actually wrote a little paper pointing out that she was getting results very different from the ones that were expected. And we had our usual meeting. And when we got to her program, which was an ongoing program, so people just looked it over, the leading extragalactic astronomer on my committee of that day immediately said, well, look, she's getting this result. It doesn't fit. It has to be wrong. I recommend that we stop the program. That was his position. And what was interesting to me was I sat there and listened to this discussion. And the majority of the people, because of his level of knowledge and authority, went along with him. So the recommendation of the committee was that we stop the program. Well, I had the last word, so I ignored it. But most people don't. And the peer review system and NASA itself, which is very conformist, will always do just that. That's one of the reasons why the road ahead is hammered out. As Hoyle said, anytime you point a new telescope at the sky now, you're only going to find what you already know is up there.
I have a lot of trouble with the academic world, the same as I do with the Bible Belt. It's the same kind of trouble. It's the same kind of trouble. It's because they get a picture of this world which they are sure is right.
Yes, yes.
And they hang on to it for all they're worth. But you know, I often point out that I am probably more unorthodox than anyone who has ever burned at the stake. It's illegal now.
Illegal burning.
It's illegal now to burn somebody to the stake in your backyard.
Peculiar galaxy NGC 7603, discovered 30 years ago by Halton Arp, is one of the more striking examples of galaxy-quasar connections. It has recently been re-examined after the discovery of 2 new quasar-type objects embedded in the connecting filament. The renowned optical astronomer Margaret Burbidge has for decades been a central figure in the struggle to bring controversial observations such as NGC 7603 to the attention of conventional astronomers. And for her fairness and untiring efforts in the field, she has become one of the most widely respected women in astronomy.
There's a very interesting galaxy known as NGC 7603. It's a Seyfert galaxy. That means it has one of these active nuclei with strong emission lines and a lot of activity, obviously, going on in its center. And it was studied years ago by Chip Arp in his Atlas of Peculiar Galaxies. it has a spiral arm that seems to come right outside of the galaxy, trailing right out, and it ends up on a fainter galaxy, but it ends right up, so it's connected the nuclei of the two galaxies.
In the Atlas of Peculiar Galaxies, which was published in 1966, that was the point of the atlas, and one of the objects, just to illustrate what a peculiar galaxy is this what is now famous NGC 7603, and this is the central Seyfert, which means just a very, very active galaxy with a lot of energy in the nucleus and a lot of explosive energy and so forth. And here is the high redshift companion here, and you see it's joined by a filament of material.